The horse I'm working on today is an older horse that gets trail ridden once in a while, and thankfully this time of year is growing a lot slower than usual, so I'm starting to be able to make some improvements in the distortions that these hooves had. The main ones being that this horse had a really long toe and very overgrown bars. And while I'm videoing this first hoof, I actually had some technical difficulties. My GoPro kept shutting itself off at the 2-minute mark, so I don't have every last bit of footage of this hoof being trimmed, but I have most of it. So yeah, you can see the main thing that I'm doing on this hoof is I'm bringing that toe back, and I'm rasping a bit into and behind the white line. And on this horse, that's okay because the apex of the frog is very deep, so I know that this horse has a lot of sole depth. And I'm taking those bars down. They're much better than they used to be. The frog is kind of compromised, but it's so unhealthy right now that I don't really want to remove a lot of it during this trim. So unfortunately, we missed some of the footage of me trimming the underside of this hoof, but I do have the rest of the footage intact, so you will get to see everything else for sure. So from the top, I'm kind of bringing this foot in and collecting it while I'm trying to create a strong bevel to prevent chipping and cracking in the future. But I'm really pleased with how this horse's hooves are trimming up and how far they've come so far, because I've only been working on this horse for about maybe 8 months, I think. Now I'm working on the other front hoof on this older mare, and as you can see, there's quite a lot of mud and muck in the hooves on this day, and we had quite a bit of rain before I went out to this barn, and the mud was unescapable. And I was trimming here by myself on this day, so there's nobody to prep the horses for me or anything like that, which I don't really mind. Like, I'm a little bit of a mud monster, if I'm being honest, but you know, it's ideal to have clean hooves to work on. It's just not always possible. And the dirt and the mud and manure, it will really take the life out of your tools, so having a clean hoof to work on is definitely ideal. Once again, this hoof, just like the other front, there's quite a bit of bar to remove, and if I didn't, it would create pressure points that could potentially lead to abscessing in the future. And the other thing I'm doing is knocking back those heels a bit and bringing back that toe. I've been really trying to collect these hooves up, and the hardest part with this horse that's making that difficult is that its heels are not very healthy, doesn't have a lot of depth in the back of the foot, doesn't have much digital cushion, so this horse likes to toe load. And then combine that with limited movement, not because this horse lives in a small area, but because this horse is old and just doesn't move nearly as much as a younger horse would. So still trying to bring back that toe, rasping a little bit inside the white line, but I can do that on this horse because I know where the internal structures are. Okay, so I wouldn't trim like this on just any horse. You could actually make a horse lame and cause some problems if you did this on a horse that was thin-soled. So don't trim this way on every horse like I am on this one. Now I'm just kind of beveling the heels, making sure it's smooth on the bottom before I address it from the top. So at this point in the trim, I'm actually using my cell phone on a little tripod to video, and I'm kind of liking it. It kind of gives you a really good view of what this bevel actually looks like from a different kind of vantage point. So sometimes I think the bevels don't look very big, but this one's nice and round and smooth, and is going to serve this horse well. Now moving on to this horse's hind feet. As you can see, getting all the mud and the muck out first. And these hind hooves are going to look very similar to the front hooves, except they have a bit more concavity and are not as flat. But you can see I'm addressing those bars first because that's the part that usually bothers me the most on this horse. This horse likes to get overgrown bars, and I think that's because the heels are a bit compromised, so other structures are trying to take over to help bring more structure and rigidity to this hoof capsule. But the overgrown bars can also become pressure points that can cause abscessing in the future, so I like to remove them when possible. So that lateral side of the hoof gets a little bit flared So I wanted to take that side down first. And then this horse's heels are a little bit difficult to gauge what kind of is the best plan of attack for them. In the past, I've left them long to try to keep this horse from becoming NPA, from having a negative plantar angle, but that hasn't really worked. It's just kind of made the hooves worse. So now I'm trying to bring the heels back as much as I can, even though that may be putting this horse at a bit of a negative plantar angle, which I really don't want to do, but I'm trying to pick my poison with this hoof, well, with this horse's hind hooves, and then see how that plays out and see how that works. Sometimes it's a little bit of a guessing game where you try different methods until you find something that works for that specific horse. So trying to bring his toe back, give him a nice bevel, make sure everything's smooth before I address this hoof from the top. But I try to do most of my work on this hoof from the bottom. And the reason I try to do most of my work on this horse's hooves from the bottom is because it's usually not very comfortable bringing its hind hooves forward. As you can see, that hoof is kind of at a strange angle, and that's because that is the angle that the horse is most comfortable. But it makes it hard to really make good contact with that lateral heel quarter. So I try to just smooth everything from the top. And that's about it for this hoof. Now trimming the last hoof on this horse, which happens to be the right hind, and getting all the mud and muck out of this hoof first. I wish on this day I had brought out my wire brush, but I didn't think to do that. It would be a lot easier on my tools if I wire brush this hoof a little bit before getting in there with like my knife and my nippers and my rasp. But it is what it is, and everything still worked out fine. So just like the other hind hoof, I'm addressing those bars first because they're the most overgrown structure on the hoof. And this hind doesn't have as much concavity as the other one, and is actually narrower on the medial side and flares a little bit on the lateral side. So I'm going to try to address that flare from the bottom, but I'm also going to address it from the top. And really kind of trying to create a good bevel for this horse to prevent chipping and cracking. And just like the other three hooves, I'm rasping inside the white line just a little bit. Trying to bring those heels back without taking too much height, because I don't want to put him in a negative angle on this hoof either. But that's looking pretty good for this one, and I'll finish it from the top now. Now I have this last hoof pulled forward on the stand, and I'm trying to my best really to get a good bevel from the top, but you can see this hoof is kind of at a strange angle just like the other hind one was when pulled forward. So I'm trying to maneuver it in a way where I can still access the areas of the hoof wall that I need to get to without making this horse annoyed or uncomfortable. So I managed to do it in the end. Just kind of have to mess with your tools a little bit and keep trying to realign things until you find that sweet spot. But anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below, and I'll do my best to answer them.